Hello folks, and welcome back to the channel. Together with these great partners, we are able to bring you quality information to help you reach your whitetail habitat goals quicker but more proficiently. Northwoods Whitetails, Plot Doctor, Harper Growing Solutions, Scent Thief, Real Wood Productions, First Form Outdoors, Ace Hardware of Harrodsburg, Kentucky, Bass Pro and Cabela's. Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. We got some coffee brewing this morning in the background. We're here in the lodge, and hard to believe it's December. Each and every year it just seems like the seasons just fly by, whether you're still chasing that target buck or you know, like I do have some guests coming in and out of camp after my tag is full, and it just seems like the season, you look back and it's just a blur. And that kind of ties into today's topic. We get to this point in the season, and it's a long kind of a marathon, right, that you hear of, and it's just this, when's it gonna happen? And it can be mentally and a lot of times physically, depending on the country that you're hunting, right, just draining. So I try to teach this throughout the entire year, to pick and choose starting early season, so you don't get to a point, so when that pre-rut and rut time comes in, you've got all the ambition and all the time and that you need. And then also be able to look forward, right, look into what is the chances, you know, per the farm that I hunt or per the region I hunt, what is the chances or what are my odds going into late season? So that's what we're going to talk about today, guys. Having those, and if you are in a spot that does have higher odds, having something left in the tank for the late season. So we're going to talk about the top 3 post-rut strategies. Now when I say post-rut, obviously I mean post the first rut, you know, in the sought after rut, I should say, right? The normal rut that everybody focuses on per your region. Post rut actually is what it says, right? It's following the rut. Well, what we're going to talk about today, guys, is I've talked about it before, and I don't think a lot of folks understand the whole process behind that female deer anatomy, if you will, that gets us to having a second rut. And yes, there is a second rut, and yes, it can be very powerful. So we're going to go over a couple things to kind of explain that to you, kind of break that down, make it make a little bit more sense. Some of you are going to experience it, some of you are not, and there's some things that tie into that, right? Does the property have anything left? Is it not overpressured? How many bucks in your area have been shot? What is your doe numbers? You know, that all ties into any hunting strategy, but especially the second rut. So the number one thing we're going to focus on today, guys, here is what is the strategy, right? My strategy is this: after the end of November, going into the month of December, to me is the, we're going to label that the post rut, right? It's the time to start taking into consideration less AM hunts and more PM hunts again, just as we did early season. And the reason for that is, guys, it's very food oriented, right? It's very food related. The mindset of that should go back to, why are these deer, what are they doing, where are they bedded, and how important, how powerful, if you will, right? How important is that attractant of a food plot, of a feeder? You know, what is the you know, the water hole, stuff like that. They're going back, they're trying to regain that 20 to 30% body weight that these bucks have lost during the rut. And these does were the ones being chased. They don't drop near as much weight because they continue to be food oriented, where the bucks don't. And they just grab a bite to eat, kind of fast food, if you will, whenever they have the opportunity presents itself. So that's kind of what our strategies go to, focus more on the PM now, PM hunts. Now, if you're tuning into this from the south, And each year my clientele from the southern states grows, and I love designing and helping folks in that southern part of the country. And the reason for it is, guys, the way that I design a lot ties to that that terrain and that habitat that you guys have down there, and it all builds to be able to experience stuff that we talk about here a lot on the channel, or many other channels talk about, kind of based on Midwest hunting, if you will, right? Northern hunting or Midwest hunting. You hear that a lot. I get a lot of clients that call and, well, your stuff won't work in the South. Well, it will work in the South. You guys just aren't used to doing that because food plot hunting and hunting over feeders and the way that the big leases are down there, where there's multiple people hunting these clubs, hunting off from a 2-track, getting dropped off. That's the traditional, maybe even dogs, right? In the South, that's the traditional way to hunt down there. But once they see where my brain goes when I'm designing, right, they have the experience to have these second ruts, third ruts down there, warmer temperature, more deer, more ruts. So we're going to explain that, but that's the power in knowing your region and what it has left, and what is left in the tank for the deer, and that ties into those strategies. PM hunts, right? If you're going to experience a second rut, or you have a potential to experience a second rut, by all means have something in there for that being left, and make sure you're focusing on that PM hunts. Second part is number 2 here, guys, is the second rut focus. So we're gonna touch on that. We talked about that a little bit already, but the second rut focus is just that. The more deer that you have, in most cases, the better chance that you have to experience the second rut, because some of your mature does weren't bred or didn't catch, and they're going to come back into heat again, or the yearling does, the 6-month-old does, when they hit that 6-month mark. When you're talking about bucks or deer in general, right? You always hear that. 2.5, 3.5, 4.5 years old. Why are we doing that? Because the fall is that half-year mark where they're born in the spring and you get to fall, so they are, another 6 months older, and that's where that 6-month-old doe fawn finally gets enough body weight, 60, 70, 80 pounds in per region, whatever you're at, and all of a sudden they start being able to produce that pheromone, or start do that process of the estrus, right? So one of the things that we need to focus on first of all, then we're going to go into how to back that out, and how to figure out when the best time to be in the stand is in your area per the second rut. Let's talk about this. I really feel there's 2 pieces of this puzzle, right? When you're talking about hunting strategies in the second rut. One is food, right? Your food plots, your feeders, like we do, feeders on food plots, supplemental feeding, whatever that case is, food focused. These bucks are starting to rebound, right? They're starting to put that feed bag back on, right? It's going to take them a little bit to get used to not being pressured again. That's why we back the AM hunts off, unless something's making major mistakes in the morning where you can get in and get out untouched. You focus on PM, all of a sudden they start getting to a mindset where they're not being bumped off the farm. And then what they're doing is they're already going to feed, right? They're starting back into that, bed to food patterns, if you will. Then what happens is these young does are going to be out in these food sources feeding. The reason that this can be so powerful, guys, on that, per that hunt, is we've all seen it. Who are the first deer to get to a food plot in daylight hours each and every night? If you're hunting with a gun, or you're in a bow stand where you can hopefully see the food plot, you're not sitting on it, right? How many times have you looked up and the first deer past you, or the first deer on a food source, first deer to a feeder, is a button buck or a 6-month-old doe? That is what makes this more powerful, because as soon as those 6-month-old does start producing that estrus or that pheromone and start to really be attractive, right, to these bucks, They are out in the food plots early. Well, guess what's going to happen? It happens time and time and time again, every year around the entire country. These bucks that are left, that you've been chasing all year, are really, really vulnerable because they want to eat and they get in trouble chasing not only the leftover mature does that come in, which there will be some. They all of a sudden now have this young stock coming, this new stock of estrus does, young does, 6-month-old does, and they want to be out to the food. They're very social. They want to be out there. They're the first ones that the does send out into the food plots. Well, guess what? That's that daylight movement that we talk of. So the second portion of that is this: water. Depending on where you're at in the region, further north you get, this can get tricky. Water is king this time of the year. The more that they start eating, it's no different than us. The more you eat, the more you need to drink, the more you need to wash it down with, right? And water is such a powerful nutrient rebuilder, and the enzymes and everything that goes into rebuilding your body back has to do with hydration, has to do with water, right? It's no different than a college athlete or my son, for example. He's into bodybuilding. He's in his college prime, and the kid drinks gallons and gallons and gallons of water, right? So that's the key to focus on, is that water pinnacle. Very attractive. So if you get back into those preseason strategies, such as 2 years ago when I killed Atlas, that is that inline food. If you can find, hopefully you can find and or create, not force the envelope, but find those PM water sources. You have an early season strategy, a stand location, and more importantly, you have a late season PM water hole on the way to food. And boy, I'm telling you what, guys, big piece of that attraction puzzle. So how do you figure out when they're going to come back into heat? As you're watching this, I'm going to try to release this on about the 8th or the 9th, which is going to be Kentucky's second gun season here, or second muzzleloader season, I'm sorry. How you figure this out, guys, is this. The does are in estrus, and there's so much you can get on, from being in this world for so long and having that high fence connection as far as the breeding facilities and then having friends that are still doing that with the breeding and knowing these deer for so long in this world that I've been in, you really understand the process. And then also raising hogs. We used to raise show hogs, the kids and I did before them. And it's the hog and the deer are very similar anatomy wise. The female reproductive system in that triggers every 28 days. So they will not go into estrus until they hit that 60, 70, 80 pounds of body weight at 6-month-old. Then they will start producing this every 28 days. So notice when I say this, guys, focus on that key. Every 28 days, these does go into heat. So if your rut in your area is commonly around that, let's say here, it peaks about what I have found here. Now you might go an hour north, you might go an hour south, or you might go into a different state, and it might be different. But like where I'm at here in Kentucky, our peak is around the 11th of November. This has been 3 years in a row now. It's pretty spot on. So what's going to make the rut when we hunt, we think it's earlier or later, is the weather, right? The action, the activity. But don't get fooled into thinking that the doe's estrus cycle changes because of the weather. It doesn't. It's going to happen every 28 days. Some of those areas are going to fall when the weather's better. You're going to see more chasing, right? But their system goes into heat every 28 days. It's no different than a human's female body. Their estrus cycle, it all goes around that set date. You can't change that, right? What changes that is when they get bred, they stop that heat cycle. So they go into what we refer to as that gestation period, right? So what you do, guys, is you take that and you advance it 28 days. Well, you take November 11th and you advance it 28 days. you have December 9th. No weekends that get out of there. We're not on a 9 to 5 here, right? You just advance it 28 total days, and we're right into the December 9th and December 10th, which is the start of a week-long second muzzleloader hunt here in Kentucky. So many times throughout the year, I always try to focus, look back on what happened last year. Go to Weather Underground, look at your farm, or your area, the area that you're hunting in general. Maybe you're hunting multiple farms. Look back and really study on Weather Underground, what happened last year. And it's going to happen, guys, within days of each other this year. But what's going to change that? That's going to re-happen within days of last year. Let's finish that. But what's going to change that is the influx or the deflux, if you will, of the immature does, right? These 6-month-old, these young does coming in. Was it a good doe fawn crop last year? Was it not? So if you, that's what kind of, to me, goes into how you gauge the rut, especially and the second rut every year, is you have to understand that every 28 days. I released a video a couple years ago that I really broke down how to, if you knew certain does or you knew family groups on the farm. Now, they're not like bucks, you can't identify them, but there's always something, always a spot of the farm where they're family groups, and you kind of get to know. I can tell you right now, I can take you for a buggy ride, and I can bump right straight into family groups, and there might be 3 in there today, there might be 4, but I'm telling you, they're there every day. They're very social. They don't go nowhere, right? They're on the farm here, locked in those doe bedding areas in that correct habitat. And I can tell you, you get real personal with them, and when you get personal with them, you can start to identify their behaviors, especially if you have a tag left. You start identifying those behaviors. You know if they're bred or not. And what happens is, guys, you take that number from this year, and all of a sudden, whether you see that or a per trail camera in that area of your farm, all of a sudden, you take that. So you roughly within a day or 2 or whatever, know when that doe is bred. You can do the chart. You can advance it out. You can take her out of put her into gestation. 200 days she fawns. 6 weeks later she comes back into heat. And then what triggers that rut and what makes it stronger is less daylight. So the bucks are what actually make the rut that we see, that we hunt, because lower daylight starts to trigger, amplifies, if you will, makes a doe's heat amplify, and the bucks start to go into rut. They shed and velvet, and they start to bulk up, and they start to get moody, and they start to find their areas, and all of a sudden lower light conditions, and then you have what we hunt, which is the rut. It doesn't mean that the does only come into heat one time, 1 month per year. It doesn't happen. So something to really educate yourself on, guys, and we could go down. There's many pieces of puzzle that tie to that. Hopefully we get to do that video sometime and with them and really dig deep into that. So water and understanding that process, big deal this time of the year. So this time of the year is when next year is made or broken. And what I mean by that, guys, is, and take this into consideration, management is not for everybody, and to each his own, right? And the older I get, the more I try to emphasize that. But if you are in that spectrum of trying to take and make next year's season, it all starts right now with knowing who's left and trigger management. So if you're into this part of the time right now, guys, you're out in the woods and you're able to start, maybe that's late muzzleloader hunt, Michigan, Ohio, here in Kentucky, every year, giants, big mature bucks that are very tricky to hunt during the pre-rut and the rut fall this time of the year. So if you're in the woods and you still have some second rut potential left, this is when you're not wanting to give up. You have to you really start studying your food plots. What do you got left? Are you supplemental feeding? Where's your pressure spectrum? Because if you are in this time, sadly, even though it's high percentage, a lot of folks aren't in the woods. Hunter numbers are plummet after about the second week of November. Hunter numbers plummet in the tank. Deer success rates, whatever is left. And yes, there's going to be a lot of them that are already killed before, but it skyrockets. And this is why each and every year, Iowa is a perfect example, giants fall this time of the year, because what we talked about in the other two topics: water, food, rebuilding their bodies, chasing, getting out there where these younger does are coming into that estrus time period, right? That's what triggers all that. So right now is the time to look ahead, look at your potential 3.5-year-old bucks that you want to slide into 4.5, or your 4.5s that you're trying to, like we are this year, trying to get a couple of those into that 5.5. And there's a couple left, and we're trying to get there. And that's how you maintain that. Don't give up. Make sure you have that availability left. Make sure that you have your strongest food plots, and your supplemental feeding. Make sure your water tanks are full. If you're not giving up, you have an opportunity to slide them forward. Like I've said in previous videos, don't be upset if the neighbor kills your target buck and turns around and another neighbor takes one of your bucks that you were trying to let go, and it's just, wow, these darn gun seasons never end. Well, what were you doing? What were you doing to try to save that, right? Were you keeping those water tanks full? Were you continuing? Were you putting supplemental feed out? Were you keeping your farm unpressured? This is the time that advances all of this into next year. So, a lot of moving parts with this one. But every year I try to really put emphasis, and it's always a longer video, but I really try to put emphasis on why this is so important this time of the year. And I think it all goes back to folks just not understanding how powerful that second rut really is, and why it is, because of the does, right? And the doe fawns. So take these ones to heart, guys. Best of luck to you. Stay warm. For all of you guys wading in knee-deep snow up in northern Michigan, you guys can keep it up there, enjoy it, and have a great white Christmas, and keep that stuff north of the Ohio River. That's fine with me. So little bit every now and then is nice, or we get to go home and see it with the kids and stuff, but I don't want to live in it, so so I don't have to experience that anymore. But anyway, guys, these ones are very important. And each year around the entire country, it ties into a lot of my clients, especially because I have a lot of clients from Wisconsin and Michigan, which ties into another video that we've got coming down the road here. But it's a huge piece of the puzzle all over the country. Do you have anything left in the tank for the second rut? Thanks, guys.